I always say I try to put myself in the position for blessings to happen. So it's just put yourself in the position to find your people, and they will come. They absolutely will come.
In the corporate world, everyone's trying to get a leg up. When you're an entrepreneur and you're successful, you want to help people build up, right? It's a little bit of different, because really, you show me any successful entrepreneur and I will show you somebody who had help from somebody years back, where they saw something in them, or they gave them an opportunity, or they gave them direction or invaluable advice to navigate.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Sliman.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. And today our guest is Aundrea Cline-Thomas. And listen, she has such a great background. It's going to be a great treat for you. She's a 3-time Emmy Award-winning journalist. She's an entrepreneur, founder of Mountain Court Media, and with 15 years experience as a reporter and an anchor in some of the top markets such as Philadelphia, New York, she's become a master at storytelling. And listen, we are all a brand. We're all a brand. We all have a voice, and sometimes it's really tough to identify that and tell that story. So this is what she does. She is impacting leaders to authentically help them tell stories, organizations tell stories. She's also a podcast host, as I am, on The Next Big Thing. And she gives some great insight around leaders, their conversations, their stories. And it's going to be a treat again today to hear this transition in her career to what she is doing now to impact leaders. And Aundrea, I want to thank you for being on the show today.
I'm thrilled to be here. I can't wait for this conversation.
Let's do this. Let's back up here. You've built a fantastic career, and I'm curious in the beginning, what initially inspired you to pursue the journalism space and spark that growth over time?
Well, it really was that I was so curious about people and why people make the decisions that they make. I like the idea of holding the powerful to account. And I knew inherently, although it didn't have this language when I was younger, that stories were the thing that would connect us all. And I wanted to be a part of, telling stories that really showcased my experiences, showcased experiences that I knew my community was having, but just never made it to kind of bigger platforms.
Yeah. And there's probably so much that you learned in that time. What was one of the most impactful lessons you had during that time, especially in the beginning days of getting into journalism? Because like I said, you were in some big markets, right? You were in Philly, you were in New York. Yeah.
Before I even went to Philly, New York, my first on-air job was in Macon, Georgia, which kind of taught me the most, honestly. So I'm from the DC area, and I had never spent a significant amount of time in the South. So I'm 24. I'm living in Macon, Georgia. I'm a city girl. Okay. Even though I grew up in the suburbs, I'm a city girl-ish, to Macon, Georgia, small town. I couldn't speak to people on the phone because of their accents. I didn't understand them. And so it was the culture is totally different. So much is lost in translation. I'm like, and also everyone's calling me a Yankee. I'm transported, just everything was different. I'm at the gas station. I still have my Maryland license plate, and everyone's like, "Oh, so you're not from around here?" And I'm like, "Why are they talking to me?" Um, I don't know them, and they're inviting me to church. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful because it makes you have to confront your biases. It makes you have to, you're seeing humanity up close. This is the first time I'm covering crime. Like, this is the first time I'm covering a soldier's death. This is the first time, I had so many firsts about, it's one thing to hear about it passively. It's something completely different to be in somebody's living room, sitting with them on, quite possibly the worst day of their lives. And so to learn that as a young person, in my, early to mid 20s, it taught me so much about humanity, and that, we come from all different places, but we inherently want the same things. And it does not have to come at the expense of each other. And I know that from sitting in people's living rooms. And a lot of people live pretty homogeneous lives, right? There are people, they went to the school with the same people, they, go to worship with the same people, they go to work with the same people. But I had the unique opportunity in my career to be on the back roads, the dirt, like literally the dirt back roads, penthouse suites in a skyscraper in New York City, and talking to everybody in between. I consider it such a privilege.
Yeah, listen, as human beings, not all, I wouldn't say all of us, because I don't mind it so much. I think you're growing when you're changing, right? But as human beings, we do not like change.
At all.
No, not at
No.
all.
Yeah.
So tell me about how transition, again, from the back roads, and then you go to Philly and a New York, that change, how you adapted to that change. So if you've got somebody listening right now who it may be changing a job, maybe changing a city, maybe changing an environment altogether, what are some tips you could give somebody in changing and adapting to something new or a new market or anything I just explained?
Yes, so New York was my fifth stop. So I went from Macon to Charlotte to Nashville to Philly to New York. And
Okay.
so every few years, I was literally picking up my whole life and transporting it someplace
Oh,
else, for an idea, for a pursuit. So the first thing I would say is believe that you can do it. That believe that you
yeah.
can do it, and that if you're wanting to be uncomfortable, or if you're wanting to be comfortable, you're not going to go anywhere or do anything. And so I remember when I moved to Charlotte, I was trying to find the grocery store, and this was before GPS on your phone, right? So it's like the
Yeah.
map quest or whatever. And I think I went somewhere and I knew how to get to point A, but then I was like, oh, I need to go get some groceries. And I asked somebody and I couldn't find the grocery store, and I had to stop, and I had a whole meltdown in my car just because I could not find the grocery store. I had no family in Charlotte. I was just there
Yeah.
by myself, and I had to figure it out. And so that's number 2, is that you can figure it out. And sometimes you need to put yourself in a position to figure it out, to really show yourself what you're capable of. And the third thing is
Yes.
that there are people who want to help you. There, you can find a tribe any.
Yes.
There are people I know, how we exist right now might not signify that there is actually community, but there is, people care and people want to help. And so it's just putting yourself in the position. I always say I try to put myself in the position for blessings to happen. So it's just put yourself in the position to find your people, and they will come. They
Yes.
absolutely will come. And my life has demonstrated that time and time again, they have come. And some of the hardships have taught me to, when I see the next new person come, to say, hey, how are you? Where you living? Do you have a hairstylist? I really like mine. Once you're settled, can I take you out to
Can I
eat?
help you?
Can I help
Can you
you?
help? Can you
Yeah,
help?
because I know how hard it is. And so
Right.
it's understanding the responsibility that people will help you, but it's also your responsibility to be the helper too.
Yeah, and you have to listen back to that. And I really want to highlight a few things that you talked about here, because the first thing that you started with is change is it's good because it's going to help you grow as a human being. Because when you're stagnant and you're just going through the motions, you're not growing. Your cells aren't growing. Your brain's not growing. You're just not really growing as a human being. And that's one of the big things here. I think we can pull out of this. And then also this journey that you're in. Sometimes it's so frustrating, and you can break down.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to go into what we're going to talk about a lot today, and that is the art of storytelling.
Mhm.
By going through these things, you were able not only to cultivate a great story, but how to coach and help people
Mhm.
develop a story, because you went through these changes and these tough times. And I think more importantly, enjoy the journey versus trying to get to the outcome all the time. And I really think it's important to touch on that. Get comfortable not all the time, but get comfortable in being uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Like it's okay to be uncomfortable, right? It's okay.
It is, and it's actually necessary. 2 things there. One is
Yeah.
that a story when I went to journalism school and you're taught
Mhm.
about the story arc, right?
Yeah.
There's the introduction, the once upon a time, long time ago, if you think about your children's books,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
it's called the rising action, and that's the build up, that's the character development. But at the top of every story is the conflict. If there is not conflict, it's not a story.
Yes.
Right? So,
Yeah.
if you are not in a space where you have to kinda confront the uncomfortable, then it's not a story. The story is created in that crux, in that place is where the story is created. So that's one thing to always keep in mind. The
Yeah.
second thing is that I always go from place to place with a hypothesis. So it was, "Okay, this is what the market dictates. This is where my deficiency is. Let me go to a place that does what I can't do well much better. And let me just be in the room for the people who know how to do it because I
Yeah.
know that my deficiency can then become my strength. Or
Yeah.
even if it's not my strength, it can become a lot better. And so it's about like, I always considered it in terms of making myself marketable. How can I continue to make myself marketable? And so I didn't leave anything to happenstance. I don't know how I got like this, as strategic as I was, as young as I was, but that's how I always operated, where I'm not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go anywhere, I'm not gonna do anything. I just know at this part, this phase, okay, so I came here, here were my goals, I met my goals. All right, let me take a 10,000-foot view of the marketplace. If I want to continue, how do I need to position myself to get what I want? All right, I need to be a better writer. Let me go over here to be a better
Yeah.
writer. I need more fast paced stories. Then I got to go to a bigger market. I got to go to a Philadelphia to have those fast paced stories if I want to. Okay. And then I go to the New Yorks. So it was all very strategic. I didn't know how it would shape out, but
Yeah.
I had an intention. And that's another
Yes.
thing that you have to have an intention. It's just not you leave a lot to grace, but you gotta calibrate your GPS of where are we going here? There are very many
Yeah.
different options. What are we doing? What are we going? And we don't need to know step 10, we just need to know the next one,
Yes.
you know?
So great. And I think I say this a lot. Most recently, I've been saying this a lot on podcasts. I love your word intention. Intentional is, I was using that word yesterday on a sales training and being very intentional about how you want to present your product, how you want to live your life, right? Because what happens is once you start becoming intentional about it, it's amazing how the universe will just work with you in
Yes.
order to guide you to have things happen, right? Like I've
Yes.
lived that. I have lived that. As long as you're intentional, and you can't just say, "Okay, I want to manifest this," and it happens. I mean, you've got to be intentional about it. You got to put the
Mhm.
work in. You got to. Motion creates motion towards those things, and I think that's such a great point when it comes down to really the really what this is all about, and that is being intentional. You start
Yes.
navigating your compass a certain way and it will happen. I do want to go back to the journal because you
Yeah.
the journalism side, and this is an off the wall question, but what was one of the most, you've covered a lot of stories,
Yeah, a
right?
lot.
Everything top to bottom. Was there any story that was just very impactful for you that you covered, and why?
The first one that comes to mind is that I've forgotten the young boy's name. It was Halloween in
Uh-huh.
Nashville, and there was like a unseasonably warm day,
Okay.
and then at night it was crazy winds, just like it rained for just a short period of time, but crazy winds, lightning, and it was a tragic story. Electricity pole fell, and this young boy rode over it in his neighborhood and passed away.
Oh
I was an education reporter,
no. Mhm.
and so I covered schools, so I knew all the principals in town. And so his principal, I knew the principal, so we're trying to find the family and all that stuff. And I end up finding the family, and I did the first story with the family. And just awful. I want to say he was 10.
Oh.
Awful, awful story. But as a result, the community rallied and raised enough money. There was a barbershop who was like, okay, all the cuts from this time to this time, money towards the family, and like people were donating. Over here, this person had this thing, and they raised money, and the community buried that 10.
Oh,
And it was the first time I had felt like a direct like impact like
packed.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it was his school, he had moved schools, and so but his first school that he went to where he really had the community, was only in his new school for a few weeks. So the first school, teachers and stuff rallied together, and his grandmother found me, and she just thanked me. It was like right before a live shot too. And so I
Oh,
struggled to get through the live shot. It was the first
yeah.
time I'd
Yeah.
ever like I almost like broke down in the live shot. Um, and as soon as it like we cut, I was like in tears,
Cheers. Yeah. Yeah.
completely in tears. And it just showed me like this is the reason why we get into this is because yes, I'm meeting people on their worst day, but to make somebody else care and to kind of be a catalyst for community care, like that
Yeah.
get through, right? Is with each other. I believe it so wholeheartedly. And it's harder and harder now to like break through in those ways, but it still happens. And so that was just like, oh, like I'm being
Yeah.
used in a great way. Like my gifts are being used in such an important way,
Positive
even
way.
in such a sad way, um, because this is what humanity is all about.
Yeah, and this kind of leads me to the next question. And it when you have an impact like that on communities, and you can actually see them come together, it's amazing. And I was never a journalist, but from what you're saying here, because this goes into journalism now, and again, I know you made this trend. I want to talk about when you transitioned out of it. But what is going on with journalism today? Because I feel, again, this is just me, I think there's a
Mhm.
lot of opportunities for what you just talked about, but
Yes.
I feel like there's more of it seems like it's almost more of a divider in some spaces, um, based on, I mean, every time I turn on the local news, I mean, I can go from one negative story to the next negative story, and then maybe they sprinkle in a positive one.
Right.
And I just see that more. And I'd like your opinion on that if you're comfortable answering that.
Yes. No, 100%. And I think
Yeah.
it's because those that will be listening and watching are business people. You go where the eyeballs are, right? Like you go where your customers are. And quite frankly, people say they want the warm and fuzzies all the time, but they don't. They don't
Yeah.
watch it, they don't consume it, and they don't interact with it. And so news fundamentally is a business. And so you have to listen to what your customers' desires are and feed them what they say they want, or what they show you they want, not what they say they want,
Yeah. Okay.
and so the data does not support, although people say it all the time, I want the warm and fuzzy story. You don't watch it.
Not
Like
the
you
ratings. The
you don't
ratings
watch
aren't there
it,
for that. Yeah.
you know? And
Okay.
there's certain networks that would never exist if they only said nice things. And it's not
Yeah.
like nice, and I don't want to create a binary because it's not a binary. But
Yeah.
again, like
Yeah.
I told you the story of this child who died on Halloween. It's a really sad story, but it sparked positivity, and we were
Yeah.
able to do the positive stuff out of it. So, you know, again, and stories don't exist without the conflict. So what it
Yeah.
is that you're finding, because if the goal is our goal was always to like make things better, you have to look at what the problems are and hold
Identify them.
accountable for the problems to make them better. So who has a problem is who's going to get the airtime. So it's just kind of like this is just
Yeah.
how it kind
Yeah.
of works. And so, do I think that there is a responsibility to, possibly be more creative? Does the news need to create more of a feedback loop with its audience? Absolutely. Right now, it's also in a really pivotal moment because financially, the business model is unsustainable. And so there's a
Mm.
lot of consolidation. And so what you are seeing now, I mean, when I started, like sales is on another floor. You don't know
Yeah.
who they are. They know who you are. You don't know who they are.
Okay.
Um, And because they're not influencing editorial decisions, there's an autonomy to editorial decisions. And there's still an autonomy-ish, but that line is getting blurred because really the solvency of the industry in totality is in question. So when you're
Yes.
trying to survive, the decisions you make from survival mode are very different from maybe the foundational decisions that you make when you first start something or are in your heyday.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
also seeing that play out in a lot of different ways. So,
Yeah.
for instance, Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, is changing how the opinion columns are written. That never happens. It's very dangerous when it comes to journalism. But
Yes.
when it comes to journalism, the last thing I'll say about it is that it's a public service, but it's not charity. It's a public service, but it's a for-profit entity. And
Uh-huh.
so
Yeah.
I think that the business model does need to change. And I wish it didn't have a for-profit lens on it so it could then operate differently. But we haven't
Yes.
found a way to make that sustain. They're nonprofit newsrooms, but they're not sustainable,
Yeah.
right? So
Yes.
that's what it's grappling with right now.
That makes 100% sense to me on just how you explained it. I mean, right? It's not going to be sustainable, and that's the other thing that's I think is funny too is I've seen this on like Instagram. Like you have all these different markets, but they're saying the same thing. Like
Yeah.
the host, and they are verbatim are
Yes.
saying the same thing,
Yes.
and which tells me that there's this conglomerate almost
Yes.
too that's happening. Right. And that's probably a whole nother podcast we could jump into. But yes, I see what you're saying.
I'll just explain that very quickly.
Yeah.
So content is extraordinarily expensive. Good content, like the 60 minutes of them all, like which is like the
Yes.
gold standard in investigations, that's probably millions of dollars each episode, honestly. Like it's very expensive to create amazing content. So when you have it where there's a consolidation, right? So you have fewer people to create content, but then the news blocks, so that the amount of time that news happens, right? Before it used to be 6 p.m., right?
Yeah.
Or going
Yeah.
6
Yeah.
then it
Yeah.
was
5:30
5.
news.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then 5:30. And then we're starting at, oh, let's have the mornings. Oh, let's have a noon show. So we're broadening out because it's just more slots for advertisers to come in, right? So it can
Yes.
generate more money. And so, I mean, I'm so glad we're talking about this because people don't
Yeah.
often think about the business model of news to really
That's where
understand.
my mind is going, the whole business
Yeah.
standpoint of it. But
Yeah,
yes,
the
you keep
business
going. This is
standpoint of
great.
news.
This is so
Yeah, and
fantastic.
so there's just not enough people to create enough content to fill the news blocks. And so then you hub content, right? And so
Yes.
so you'll have, I might do a story in New York, but it'll play in Georgia,
Yes.
but it's to fill the holes. And so if you have a company and you have locations, the same company, you have locations all
All
across the
right.
country, then why should you have three people telling a Christmas tree fires, like, or how to make sure your Christmas tree doesn't catch on fire during the
Yep.
holidays? Like the
Yep.
standard, like there are these standard stories that everyone always does. Put your tree in water and all. Only one person needs to do that story now, and not 15,
And then
right?
they just stamp it and push it off to the next
Play it
network,
as
and
they
that's
live.
it.
They have a video system that you dump it in,
Just
and then
scaled it.
everywhere you use, because it's the same story wherever you go. It's a universal evergreen story. And so instead of paying 15 people to do the same story, let's pay one person who, by the way, won't have a photographer anymore. They're going to have to shoot the story themselves, shoot, write, and edit it themselves now. Um, and then that's how it's going to happen as a cost cutting measure.
Wow. What a
Yeah.
lesson. Because that's right. That's exactly what I was going into this with the business model in my mind. And now that draws so much clarity. Because you can tell, even some of these stories, even on the ABC morning, is you can tell they're reaching. They're reaching for something, right?
Yeah.
But what you just said too, to be able to stamp it and almost scale it, so to speak, that's the only way they're going to survive. So, very interesting. Yeah, I'm glad I touched on that.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to keep moving here. What made you decide to shift from being a journalist to founding Mountain Court Media and really leveraging your experiences and doing what you're doing today. I'd love to hear
Yeah.
that.
So because I saw the consolidations happening, it started as a trickle, but it just became so glaring to me because I always have had an entrepreneurial mindset, although I never had a business before, right? But I was always like, I don't know how we make money, but I know that I think we're going to struggle a lot more. Like, you know what I mean? Because it was just I was like, my friends don't really make an appointment with the news, only my parents do. And, like I'm not seeing consumption increase. And I'm also seeing the response to the lack of consumption not being one that will change behavior. And so because of that, and I saw that I had a ceiling, right? Like they
Yeah.
wanted me to do bigger things and be on bigger platforms, but am I gonna get paid what it used to fetch from
Right.
before? And it's like I my first job, I made $18,000 a year. I have 2 degrees, And so I have put in the work and the time and took a real big hit to my, income possibility, my lifetime earnings, by pursuing this love, and I still love it, but
Yeah.
the math didn't math anymore.
Didn't add up.
Terms of the cost of, you know, always being on. I could be called in anytime. I was called in a lot for the morning shifts. If the morning anchor was out, then I would get a call at 8 PM the night before. Hey, we need you in at, 3:30 the next morning.
Yeah.
And then I have to be coherent. And then the older you get, the harder it is to just shake that off. It's one thing to do that when you're 30, but like later,
Uh-huh.
your body just doesn't work the same, right?
Uh-uh.
And also I just was like, but that doesn't mean like while I had my head in the sand and I was like hard charging, like climbing this ladder, I also was aware I was like some other stuff is happening over here. And that's the whole
Yeah.
digital economy was happening. And my brother's an entrepreneur, a very successful one, and
Okay.
he had a documentary on HBO. I think that was a huge light bulb moment for me. I was like, wait, you graduated with a finance degree and you're doing this like
Good.
thing that I would love to do. And I can't even see a path for myself to do it. But you, finance guy, have a path to storytelling that like journalism is not the gatekeeper to storytelling anymore. Like a lot more people can get in this game. And so if there's a ceiling for me over here, that doesn't mean I have to abandon everything. It just means that I need to be able to get into some of these other games. And so that's really what I wanted to do was continue on and not completely forget about
Right.
everything.
Abandon everything you did. Right. Because you've earned that. Right.
We wanted to
And
do it in a lot more ways.
yeah. And I want to go back a little bit here because there's some listeners out there who have thought about getting into business for themselves.
Yeah.
Like they feel like they're an entrepreneur, maybe in an organization, and they want to take that lead, but they don't know, like you said, they don't know the finance, they don't know the back. Tell me about that leap. And if you could give anybody an advice who's thinking about going into business themselves for the first time, or maybe again, what kind of advice would you give them when going back to that mindset of where you were, where you're like, I know I want to do something. I'm not going to abandon it. I'm going to play to my strengths. How'd you do it?
Well, okay. So I will say out the gate, don't do everything I did. On the other side, don't do everything I did. Don't do that. So one of the things that's really difficult is that when you're on air, you can't moonlight because there's a perceived conflict of interest. So I could not then go consult on the side because that would be a breach of contract because I had to maintain objectivity. So that made
Yeah.
that's why I had to leap the way I did because there was no moonlighting opportunity. It just
Damn.
because I didn't
You
have
were
contract,
locked.
I
Yeah.
couldn't do
You
it.
were
I was locked,
locked.
which
Yeah.
is another reason why I had to go. Because if somebody says we're only going to pay you this and you can't make money any other way, then
Yeah.
you're putting it just what else am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Um, so one of the things that I did really well was a lot of self-assessment, right? I really asked myself a lot of questions. I still got into entrepreneurial communities. I was attending entrepreneurial events for 10 years. Didn't know what they were talking about, but I was like, let me just go ahead and be in the room. Let me take some notes because what you need to do is you have to have a completely different mindset as an entrepreneur. And I tell anybody who wants to transition, even if you want to transition within another corporate role, I told my friend this the other day. I said, I need you to get around entrepreneurs because they're the ones who understand that anything is possible. And they're the ones who are going to figure out how to make it possible. While
Yes.
the corporate mindset is not that flexible. So I got around the right people and I started asking a lot of questions because I knew I didn't want to have rose colored glasses on. Um, and the questions I asked myself were, what's my value add? So storytelling is the big umbrella, but what did I want to tell stories about? What did I love? And sometimes those were too big of questions at the very beginning. Those questions were too big for me to answer. So
Yeah.
in any given day, when I had a really good day, what was I doing? Who was I talking to? Who was I with? What stories was I covering? Was I even covering stories? Right? What
Right.
lights me up and starting to be sensitive to my natural inclinations and writing it down. Now, if you
Right.
want to jump into entrepreneurship, I would recommend getting into a program. There are lots of coaching programs because there's just some things that you're just not going to know how to do and how to think about it and have an offer set and all of that. So I got my LLC. But I didn't have a business and I did stuff under the umbrella of the LLC. So when I left, I was like, okay, I want to do long form stories. This was my pie in the sky. I said, I want to do long form stories. I want to do in-depth stories and find a home for them. If you asked me in 2022, that's what I would have told
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
It
Okay.
evolves.
Didn't happen.
It
Those
evolves.
doors did not open. Okay. They did not. I tried. I knocked. They said no. Mm-mm. No, those doors did not open.
Not gonna work.
But what had happened that I didn't even fully realize is that because it took 10 years. I had been thinking about
Yeah.
what transition could possibly, because I saw the business was changing and I was like, I might not like this. But my biggest thing was like, I didn't want to be 50 on the side of the road in a snowstorm. I was like, I want more options. I can't be that reporter in the snowstorm at 50. It was
Right.
getting old to me. And I was like, I don't want to be that person. So how do I create leverage for when I have that moment so I can jump? I didn't know when it would be. And I hoped it would never come. But if it did, I wanted to start getting ready.
You
But
want to be
during
there.
that curiosity and discovery, I was cultivating contacts. I was making friends with people outside of the industry, just people I liked, people I kept up with, people I'm saying, hey, this is where I am right now, just giving you an update. So when I left, I I left my job, and the first gig I got, I saw from a woman who I knew, da, 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 triangulated, got my first contract within a week. After trying to apply for jobs for months and got no jobs. Okay, I could not get a corporate. I was trying because that would be the prudent thing to do, and I could not get a job. But look, they sometimes you need, what do they say? God takes care of babies and fools. I was a whole fool and got taken care of, right? But then after that, I put on social media, which is, I think that's really important to talk about too. I put on social media like, "Hey, this was," when my last day came, I was like, "Hey, it's my last day. I'm so grateful, blah, blah, blah." And then friends were like, "Hey, have you thought about this? Hey, have you thought about that?" And it has been a have you thought about, I think you will be great for 2.5 years. Everything that I've done has come from a friend. And through those experiences, because the first year I said yes to everything, it was hard for me to define what my business should or could look like because I didn't have the necessary exposure to determine that. I had only known what I had known, right? So sometimes people can have jobs where they were a CPA in this company and now they're independent. But I was going to be transferring skills. That's a whole different animal when you're
Different.
transferring skills.
Yes. Yes. I think this, I want to back up here because there's
Yeah.
some great things you said. Okay. First is surround yourself with entrepreneurs or the people that you want that are going to elevate you, right?
Mhm.
Because here's the thing I'll tell you about entrepreneurs that's different than the corporate world. Though I haven't worked in the corporate world tremendously, I do consulting in the corporate world, but in the corporate world, everyone's trying to get a leg up.
Mhm.
When you're an entrepreneur and you're successful, you want to help people build
Mhm.
up, right? It's a little bit of different, because really you show me any successful entrepreneur and I will show you somebody
Mhm.
who had help from somebody years back where they saw something in them, or they gave them an opportunity, or they gave them direction, or invaluable advice to navigate, which is kind of what we're doing right now, which is fantastic. And then the other thing is, you said that I think is important here is, in the beginning, if you're not sure, but you have an idea, right? It's kind of like a blob. Yeah, it's okay. Say yes to everything that you feel, that where you feel like you can serve and
Mhm.
help, because you will start finding, once you start going down these roads, you'll get exposed to different things. You'll get exposed to different ideas. You'll get pressed a little bit. There'll be some things you really like. There's things I've done in the past where I'm like, oh, I wouldn't do that consulting again.
Right.
Like
Right.
like I'm going to investigate this a little bit more, because I remember one of the first consulting gigs that I did. A company said they were ready for sales, started generating sales for the organization. They weren't ready to execute. So it was a good lesson in the beginning. Go, oh, I got to do more investigating before I
Yes.
just take something on. But anyway, just saying yes, because it will create itself as long as you're, again, being intentional. And I really didn't want to miss that. So I
Yeah.
didn't mean to cut in. I do cut in every now and again, but that I wanted to make sure we highlighted that. It was really important.
No, I think it is really important, and what you say no to, as you said, is sometimes even more important to what you say yes to. Like, what you figure out
Yeah.
you like or you don't like is sometimes more important than what you actually like. Um, and I spent the first year just doing a lot of different things, and then I took some quiet time to hone in. I really needed some more infrastructure. Also, while all of that's going on, I'm taking a lot of classes. 'Cause it's a humbling process. It's a very
Yes.
humbling process. So I'm taking a lot of classes. I
What
have
kind of classes are you taking? What are you taking?
so everything, marketing, business plans, just
Great.
just everything, how to, kind of deal with your time management,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
all that
how
stuff.
to get leads, how to just pricing, just
Yeah,
all the things that I'm just like, I didn't
you
I didn't
know.
sell anything before, right? Like, I wasn't
Yeah,
I just did
what a leap.
stores.
What a leap you took. That's
Wild,
fantastic. Fantastic.
wild. Um, but again, sometimes it's not about what you have in the moment. Sometimes it's about proving to yourself what you've got deep down inside. So it's just like I didn't have to show up in the world in this way ever, right? Because I had the big company name. I was on television every single night. Um, and I could just do the stories that I think are important. And that's part of why journalism isn't doing well, because we didn't consider sales metrics. We just said, what stories do we think need to be told? We didn't check in with them. You know what I mean? We didn't do the proper things, which is why having the business models not doing well right now. But there was a freedom in just like, I want to tell this story. I think this is really important to, share. This is impacting a significant number of people's lives and they need to know about this. But it's very different than how I operate right now, right? So everything that I'm doing is different, and it's painful sometimes because it's just like, "Oh my god, I gotta transfer another skill." So I'm still doing so many things for the first time, um, but I know that I can because there's gonna come a point where you have to pull on your receipts to, like, pave your path forward. Is not because you've done it before, it's because you've been able to overcome in the past, Like, that's what you pull on, um, and then trust yourself in that space, to have the confidence to even show up and try. And there's a lot of value in trying, and that's what entrepreneurship is. It's trying and testing and trying to do it fast enough to where you can learn and iterate, you know?
Yes. It's amazing because, I heard this recently, like why people don't try or why they don't set goals.
Mhm,
And a lot of times it's two things. It's either one, their fear of getting judged, or two, their fear of failure. And
mhm,
actually, the failures are the things that I always say this. I will only call it a failure if you don't learn something from it, right?
Right.
Like it's a challenge. That's a challenge. If you learn it's a true failure if you make a mistake and you don't learn from it and you do it again. That's a true
Mhm.
failure. But yeah, I think putting yourself out there is that things aren't going to work perfect. But again, it comes back to what we talked about earlier. If you're being intentional and you're putting in an effort, things are going to work out. Things are really going to work out. And I love that.
Yeah.
So listen, through now you have Mountain Core Media, right?
Yes.
And you help clients craft an authentic, like
Yes.
impactful narrative storytelling. Can you
Yes.
walk us through the process? I want to dig into that now. I want you to walk us through the process in helping somebody really tell their story.
Right. So the way I do it in that direct way, because I do it in a few different ways. One is through corporate media training. The other
Okay.
is event production. So media training is the part that's probably more kind of aligned with what you're talking about. And it's really interesting because I work with global tech executives specifically right now.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter where they are in the world, right? So they come in and they think they're going to have this like rigid program of like, this is what I should say, this is what I shouldn't say, da, 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 da. And then we ask them, what do you believe as the first question?
What do you believe?
What do you believe? Because that is where everything needs to flow from. And it's the idea. It's on a number of fronts. One, there could be 20 people in your organization, or 20 people who have the same title that you have, or 20 people who have similar businesses as you have. But what do you believe that makes you, sets you apart, right? That makes you the one that people need to hear from. What is it that you believe? Because that is where all of this is where the conversations need to flow from that space. Because it's the space where you don't have to memorize. It's the space where you don't have to be nervous because it's innate. It's the reason why you wake up every single day and you go to that job or you do that work or you work with those clients. It is centrally from what you believe. So
Love
let's
it.
go ahead and start. What is it that you believe?
Believe. And that's the cornerstone of
That's
where it
the
all
cornerstone
spawns.
of
Yeah.
where it all starts. And
Yeah.
then it's okay, so what type of, story do you want to tell? So if it's, let's say it's a personal story, right? I have a framework that I like to use of like how to kind of like tell stories. I call it like the
Yeah.
Penn's method of storytelling. And one is P is personal connection. So what is your personal connection? Whether it's your personal story or a brand story, what is the personal connection where you can kind of connect with that audience? E is the evolution. Started from here, now you're here. People want to see that, where have you gone over time,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Then N is the numbers. And this is about the credibility. This is undergirding. And we could say, I'm the best ever. Okay, of course you're going to say that, right? Who else says that, right? So this might be the testimonials. This might be if you won an award, if things that undergird and give you credibility for whatever it is that you want to share. You want to add the numbers. I always say though, it's not you don't want to have a numbers dump, right? Like so
Right.
that's
Right.
we don't compute 50 numbers at one time. Just tell me one or two. Put it in context. Don't
I
don't
did
tell
this
me
number
every
and that's
number.
whatever the
Yeah,
fractional and this fraction and that went 300%. And yeah, gotcha.
yes.
Yes.
Unless you're asking for money, right? And then they're going to need a lot more numbers. But if
Yes.
you're just talking to a broader audience, just pick the one or two key numbers that justify and undergird your storytelling. And then the S is kind of where we started, is your secret sauce. What
Secret
is it that
sauce.
sets you apart from everybody else? And so not every story will have every single element, but the more elements you have, the more memorable you will be. And you can't forget your audience. And so let's say it's my personal story. What happened happened. First this, next, then, right? What happened
Right.
happened. But how I present it depends on the audience that I'm speaking to, right? So with the
Yes.
examples that I use depends on the audience that I'm speaking to. If I'm speaking to a journalism audience, I'm going to use more technical, maybe jargony language, because I know my audience will understand that. But when I'm speaking to a more broader audience, I'm going to explain terms more, not even use the terms. I'll just use the explanations. I might use different examples. But again, it's not just about what you want to say, it's what the audience can
Just wants to
hear.
hear. Yes. And that's the intentional part, right? Like we
Yeah.
talked about, that word keeps coming up, but you can have similar cadence, you can have similar foundation, but being intent, knowing your audience is really going to help you be more intentional about what you want to make points of, or be more focused on. And I think that's really important.
Yes.
Yeah. So you work with a lot of professionals, top to bottom,
Yeah.
organizations, top to bottom. Uh, how important is storytelling when someone's trying to transition in their career or even reinvent their careers? Because I know you do some work here as well.
Yes. Yes. I think, well, one, I think stories are the most important thing, like, on the planet. It is the thing that has stood the test of time. I told an audience last week, and I was like, you want to know how important storytelling is? What do we do with children when they're born?
Tell
They
them
they only
stories.
eat and sleep, right? But when we
Yeah.
cradle them, we're still reading them a story. Why? Because we want to open the possibilities, right? We want to, give them language. We want to foster their imagination. They don't even know which way is up but we're still starting to, read them stories from even sometimes even before they come out, right? Like,
Right.
we are reading children. But why is it that as we evolve, as we allow the world to kind of influence us, culture to penetrate us, we give our pens away and let somebody else write our why do we do that? Because we don't think
Right.
that our story is important, because we don't think we have one at all, and we're afraid nobody will listen. And nothing can be further from the truth,
There
you
comes
know?
back to, yes, it comes back
So
to what I said earlier, that fear, right? The
that
fear
fear
of judgment
of
or
judgment.
not. Yeah.
But the thing is, that is not rooted in fact for anybody. Um, just side note, I went to the advertising week like 2 years ago, and I went to the TikTok booth, and I was just like, I don't know if this thing is for me. I don't know if it's just for my nephews, if I'm aged out of this. And they're like, no, it's for everybody. And there's literally a person who plays like chess, let's say, quietly, and has millions of viewers.
Hours.
Just so I say all that to say your tribe is there. It's just like you might just not be connected with them, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean they don't exist. So when it
Yes.
comes to transitions, how you tell your story is so important, because especially when you're trying to find another job, you need to be able to connect the dots for that new employer. So because especially you're probably not going to have the one-to-one background that they're used to for these positions that you're seeking. So
Yeah.
storytelling is vital in allowing others to see you in the place that you want to go to,
So
right?
great. Yes.
So you have to, for news, I would go to the National Association of Black Journalists has a huge conference every year, and they
Yeah.
have a career fair. And so, we would show up to the career fair. I didn't show up in jeans and a t-shirt, although it was like a relaxed time. You're in heels, you're in a jewel tone dress, you're in a full face of makeup, because you're trying to get a news director from a bigger market to be able to envision you on their
And
set.
that's,
They
yeah.
need to be able to
Yes.
see you in their newsroom. And because we didn't have, your paper resume didn't matter in news. It was when you're on air, it's your demo reel. So you had videos of the stories that you've done, like a montage, and then, stories. So these stories, you don't just show them just any old story. You show them the stories that are likely to air in their market, right? Like the coverage that would air in their market, not just where you are right now, but just to help them see you in
Yeah.
that new place. So that's what storytelling does when you're in transition, because you can't rely on your resume, explaining why you're that perfect person for that new job, when it doesn't reflect what other people who have had that job, the past experiences that that they've had in the past, or maybe what they're specifically asking for. So you have to connect the dots, and you can't expect a new employer to do that on your behalf.
Yeah, it's such a great point. And I believe this. I think I'm not saying resumes are going to go away, but I think eventually they're going to have you do, and some do now, where you have the opportunity to do a video with your
Hmm.
resume. And I
Hmm.
say take advantage if you can do it. And this is where the storytelling comes in, right? Like it's such an important piece of this to be,
Hmm.
because we're all a brand, how we started this. And you
Yes.
have to be able to, and yes, your story's unique. You are
Yes.
unique. Something unique is going on or happening with you that is going to speak to somebody. I
Hmm.
promise you that. As much as you don't think, like you were saying earlier, as much as you don't think it's interesting or not interesting, when you connect with the right person who does think it's interesting, then that foundation is there, right? Like that there's that foundational element. Maybe it's the right job, maybe it's the right partner, or maybe whatever it is at that
Hmm.
point. But there's once there's that connection, I think you have an opportunity to build that foundation. How big of a part social media playing in this all these days?
I think it's everything. I
Yeah.
really do. I think it's everything. I want to go back just real quick where you're talking
Yeah.
about the resumes possibly going away. Like, I have not filled out a resume, like, really in years. I mean,
Yeah.
I have not, in terms of like, I need to get a job, so I'm gonna fill out a resume and then
Yeah.
cross my fingers, right?
Yeah.
Every like the last Oh my gosh. After my first job in Macon, I said, I will never, because it was like the financial crisis. And I actually went home for 10 months after that job before I got my Charlotte job, and it's the
Yeah.
2008, collapse. And I was like so stressed, and I was so desperate for a job. And I told myself, I will never be this desperate for a job ever again. I hated how it
Yeah.
felt. And so then I started expanding my network as a result. So I say all that to say, especially when you're transitioning, it's more likely, especially now. LinkedIn just had a workforce survey saying the average American, 53% of Americans on the job hunt, it's taking them at least 6 months to
Wow.
find a new job, and more than 1 in 3, it's taking them at least a year to find a new job. So there's a
Wow.
lot of saturation right now in the job market, and
Yeah.
so if you are only relying on your resume, I think that's one lever. I think you need to pull the other levers, and which is why your story is how you create a community, right? We say networking,
Yes.
I say, creating friends. You need an orbit of people, and they need to be, um, you have to be a magnet to it, and your story is that like magnetic force, right? And I think then they help you open doors to new opportunities. So in my transition, every dollar I have made has come either directly or indirectly from a friend, and everything is not the friends that I've had for 10 and plus years. Some of them are friends that I made 3 months ago, who had a
Yes.
conversation and I wasn't in the room, and they said, "You know who would be great for that?" And they've literally put money in my pocket as a result. We're meeting because of the way that I tell stories on social media. So your question was pertaining to the role social media plays. What do you do when you say, I might like this person, like, put yourself in a recruiter's role. Like, oh, this
Yeah.
is great. Let's say they do see your resume. They're just gonna be like, "Oh, this is I'm gonna Google you." Every time we had a new reporter coming, it didn't matter what station I was at. New reporters coming, the first thing was like, "Let me Google."
Yep. Go to LinkedIn, go to Google. I'm going to do everything.
Yeah,
Yep.
go to all their social media, all of it. Nothing There's no such thing as private social media. It's all public. And there's only like one direct, you know, uh, what do they say? Like, you always have a connection in common. Somebody knows you from somewhere to do something. And if I Google you and I see nothing, you have work to do. Because the easiest way when it comes to LinkedIn, especially, the effort that I take to put a LinkedIn post, that one time effort, it has exponential just a return on investment. So just in terms of a time suck, I could sit I could sit in my business and write all these proposals and do these cold emails, or I could tell my story and have people in my DMs. What's the return on investment that I prefer to expend? And again, it's not one lever versus another. It's pulling multiple levers at a time, but we have finite amount of time, right? And so if we have to lean towards the things that can give us the highest return on investment, storytelling should be really top of mind for everybody.
Yes. And listen, you're right. We are only here for think about all the time before us and think about all this time is going to go on after. We are here for such a small amount of time. And don't worry about getting judged or falling on your face. I remember the first post I did years ago on LinkedIn. It was like, I was ready to push this post button and I was like, boom. And I went, oh my goodness. I set it up. Now it's out there. Now what? And it's like, I'll do a post every other day now. But anyway, and doing these shows, I love doing them. So yeah, just like take that leap, right? Like we talked about getting uncomfortable, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like all this stuff that we've talked about today, Aundrea, has been like full circle. And this has been such a fantastic conversation. I can't believe we're coming up on an hour already. Like this
I
flew.
know. It flew by.
Unbelievable.
It flew by.
So before I let you go, looking ahead, what's next for you? Any projects, initiatives, things that are coming about for you to keep an eye on?
Yeah, so I've launched a community for people who are navigating their career and life transitions where I bring in facilitators to help with workshops and create accountability measures so people don't just talk about the work, that they do the work. It's called the Next Best Thing community, which is part of part of my podcast is called the Next Best Thing. And so because we can talk about it, you can listen to this podcast, but it doesn't work until you do. Right. And so it's all about doing the work. And I like to be the guide and kind of be everyone's co-pilot to make sure that people are doing their work. So and then I'm just looking for more partners in all the work I'm doing because I really think right now we have to open our arms a lot wider, right? We need to expand what our communities look like, and we need to open our arms wider. And I really love working with people who are in their lane and are in their gift and figuring out, all right, how can we make this mutually beneficial? So I'm always looking for that.
I love it. We didn't even get to touch about your podcast, but yes, the Next Best Thing. Check out Aundrea's podcast. It's really good. I've clipped some snips of that as well, and also, what you're doing now, just impacting people. Where can people find you, Aundrea? If they want to reach out to you and connect with you, where can they find you?
Yes. So you can find me at mountaincourtmedia.com is my website. And then also I hang out on LinkedIn. A lot. So you can send me a DM on LinkedIn. I will see it. I will respond. Let me know that you listen. Let me know what resonates with you. It really matters a lot to me. So yes.
Great. I really have enjoyed our time together. This has been such a great interview. Let's make sure to stay in touch. I think there's some things down the road that we can do together. And it's just been great connecting with you. This has been so impactful. And as I always say at the end of these, wealth, health, success to all of you out there. Go get a win today. I don't care how small it is. I don't care how big it is. Just go get a win and then stack that thing. And this show is getting great momentum because of guests like you. So thanks for being on the show today. And everybody, we will see you next time.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Sliman.